morning, we are going to be in John chapter 13, so you can flip there. We finished up a series on Acts. We're doing a mini-series right now on loving our neighbors, and we are going to jump into the book of Hebrews very soon. But this morning, we're going to be in John chapter 13. We're specifically going to be looking at verses 34 and 35, so you can flip there. I've got two little ones at home, and they are young, and they are not perfect, as none of us are. And so we have had to start utilizing this tool called the timeout. And it is something that all of us have experienced to some extent in our own lives, because none of us are perfect. But it's fascinating. My daughters hate it. They hate it. They hate being in a room by themselves. They hate being closed away from mom and dad and having to sit and think about what they've done. But they hate that separation with the timeout. And it doesn't just stop with little kids. This is something that we kind of carry on as kids get older. We send them to their room for this time of isolation where they have to reflect, and hopefully the goal is for them that they would learn from what they've done. But we send them to their room, and then as they get older into the teenage years, they're grounded. It's not called a timeout anymore. That would be so rude. But we call it being grounded, and so they have to stay home. Their phones are taken away, and they have to be isolated from their friends, which is just the worst. And so nobody wants to be grounded. Nobody wants to get a timeout. Nobody wants to get sent to their room, and nobody, wants to get grounded. And so these are tools that we use to help people learn, but the reality is that those times, the reason that we do those things is because it's hard. Being isolated, being separated from people is a challenging thing. And we see that even going on into a much more significant discipline. But in jails and in prisons, there's this term solitary confinement. When there's bad behavior, people can get put in solitary confinement where they are separated for over 20 hours a day from any other human contact, which I can't even begin to fathom. And researchers have done studies on the effects of that isolation and solitary confinement. And to some extent, I'm not going to say that it's even close to solitary confinement, but to some extent, we all experienced a little bit of this during COVID when we were kind of put in our own homes and not told that we weren't supposed to leave and stuff like that. We experienced some of these implications, but the researchers have found, after studying those who have gone through solitary confinement, that it drastically impacts our minds and our bodies, being separated from others. And some of the things that they say is that it increases anxiety, stress, depression, hopelessness, anger, irritability, hostility, panic attacks, paranoia, poor impulse control, social withdrawal, outbursts of violence, psychosis, fear of death, and thoughts of self-harm. And these are some of the things that happen when we are in isolation from other people. Our mind begins to break down. And not only our mind, but our bodies as well. Our physical bodies, just from being separated from people, begin to break down. Some of the issues that we see in this study is chronic headaches, eyesight deterioration, digestive problems, dizziness, excessive sweating, fatigue and lethargy, heart palpitations, loss of appetite, muscle pains, sleep problems, trembling hands, and weight loss. So it's fascinating to think about the fact that just being isolated causes our mind and our body to shut down. And the reality is that you and I were not created to live in isolation from other people. We weren't created to be in a timeout forever. We were created to be in community with other people. That's part of who we are. Our minds and our bodies need that. God created us in that way. So you were created intentionally by God to be part of a community. And He even modeled that for us by the very nature of His being. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, 3 persons in one. God models this need for community, and we benefit greatly from being part of a community. But not only just being part of a community, We don't just reap rewards from being in a community. We benefit even greater from actually contributing to that community. And so today we will discover how we can love our neighbors within our community. That's really what we get to unpack, and that's what we get to look at, how we can love our neighbors within our community. So I'm going to read these 2 verses for us, and then we're going to get into some prayer, and then we'll get into the teaching. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this opportunity to open up your word. We thank you for the truths that you have for us. And God, I pray so deeply that you would show us the ways that we can grow in our love for one another, and in turn grow in our love for you. Father, we thank you so much for this time. Move in power. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so the subject that we see in these 2 verses is love one another sacrificially. Love one another sacrificially. This is a command by Jesus. That's the subject. That's what we're looking at. And the object that I believe that God wants us to learn is that we would love your neighbor within the community, that you would love your neighbor within the community. And I want to give a little context to this passage before we just start pulling it apart. But in John chapter 13, we see that Jesus has entered into Jerusalem with the disciples for the Passover feast. And if you are aware at this time in Jesus' life and in this time in Jesus' ministry, they are entering into Jerusalem for the Passover. At this point in John chapter 13, they have entered into a home to share what they do not know, but will be the Last Supper together before Jesus is betrayed and arrested and crucified. And so they've entered into this home, and at the beginning of John chapter 13, Jesus washes the disciples' feet out of an act of love. He lowers himself. He was the one that they were following. And yet when they enter into this home, he is the one who is washing their feet. And then he goes on to tell them that he will be betrayed by one of them. And then he gets to impart these gold nuggets of wisdom to them. These are his final hours with his 12 disciples. And so you can imagine the truths that he's giving them before he goes through this horrible next few hours is so important because they're going to be separated from him. And so he's giving them these truths to hold on to, this important new commandment that he gives them is to love one another. So the first thing that we want to look at is how this love will impact the community, because there is an impact within the community. There's an impact within the community of this love that Jesus is declaring his disciples need to love one another with. So there is an impact within the community. Again, verse 34 says this, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another, that you also, or as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And if you notice, this is a new commandment. This is something new that Jesus is sharing with them. Again, this gold nugget before he is going to be separated from them in the garden. And we also see that in these 2 verses, he uses this phrase, love one another, 3 times. Because he is showing them the importance and the significance of this new command to love one another. And D.A. Carson says this, I think it's fascinating. He says, the new command is simple enough for a toddler to memorize and appreciate, yet profound enough that the most mature believers are repeatedly embarrassed at how poorly they comprehend it and put it into practice. To love one another. That's so true. And so as we have to understand the impact within our community of loving one another, we have to understand what love is. So first we're going to look at what is love. biblically speaking, there are 4 types of love that we see throughout the Bible. And I just want to talk about this real quick. God is the author of love. He is the creator of love. He is the inventor of love. He is the one who designed love. So therefore, all truth about what love is stems from God. Our understanding of love does not stem from culture. Our understanding of love does not stem from where we currently live. Our understanding of love doesn't stem from how other people feel about it. It stems from God because He designed it, He created it, and He embodies it. Okay? So if we're looking to try to understand what love is, doesn't it make sense to go and look at the inventor and what he told us about it? So that's what we're doing, okay? So there are 4 types of biblical love. The first type is storge, which is familial love. This is a type of biblical love that we see mentioned throughout Scripture. And it is a familial love, and it equates to a parent loving a child. So this word storge is not used specifically in John 13, but it is used all throughout Scripture. And so it is that familial, family love from sibling to sibling, parent to child, child to parent. We've all experienced that in some capacity. The next type of biblical love is eros, which is passionate love between a husband and a wife. And this word eros is intimate love, passionate love. The root of the word eroticism comes from eros. And I recognize that even saying that in church is taboo. But what we have to understand is that our God is the inventor and the designer of love. And therefore, it should not be taboo in church because the God that we worship created and designed it to be just as pure as storge, just as pure as familial love. Yet Satan and our culture has twisted it into something that it was not designed to be, and so therefore we feel that it is associated with guilt and shame and is taboo to be discussed within the church. However, it was designed beautifully by God to be shared between a husband and wife. There's nothing shameful about that. So we see storge, we see eros, and we see phileo is another type of biblical love that we see, which is brotherly love or friendship. We just talked about the men's breakfast, brotherly love, getting together as friends to build relationships. That's what phileo is. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, phileo, right? Are you getting the connection there? Okay. So phileo is friend-to-friend love. And I recognize that this is very important in life. And I also recognize that at some points, and some of us may have friendships that feel deeper than family relationships, but we have to acknowledge that there's a difference, right? Your family relationships and your friendships are actually very different, and God designed them intentionally to be that way. And so we see storge, we see eros, we see phileo, and then finally we see agape. And agape love is sacrificial or unconditional love. And the best relationship that we can have to understand this is God's love to mankind. Agape love is sacrificial and unconditional. And so as we unpack John 13, verses 34 and 35, the phrase that is used here is the verb of this word agape. And so as Jesus is instating a new command to his followers, to his disciples, he is telling them to unconditionally and sacrificially love one another, just as he has loved us. Just as he has agape, unconditionally and sacrificially loved us. And it's so important for us to understand that the very nature of who God is love. We're told in 1 John 4:8 that God is agape. He is sacrificial. He is unconditional love. His nature, his character is love. And so as we learn to love one another more, it points us directly to the one whose very nature is love himself. But not only is it his nature, he also demonstrates it to us. Romans chapter 5, verse 8 says, "But God demonstrates his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." The greatest picture of love that the world has ever or will ever seen. God becoming man, living a perfect life and dying a death on a cross, conquering sin and death by raising from the dead 3 days later so that we can be restored in relationship with God. The greatest picture of agape love that the world could ever know. We see demonstrated in Christ. This is the depths of what Jesus is asking his followers to do, to love one another with this sacrificial, unconditional agape love. So as we continue to grow in our love for God and our understanding of God and the love that God is, it allows us to grow in our love for others. But who are the others? Jesus' command here, his new command, is to love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Who is he talking about? Who is one another? You have to remember that Jesus is situated with the disciples in the upper room, and he is commanding them to love one another. Jesus isn't teaching this to a massive crowd. He's teaching this to his disciples. And so it's important for us to understand that one another is speaking of those within the body of believers. Jesus is giving this new command for his disciples to love each other with the love that Jesus shows us, and he is getting ready to show in the greatest way ever. That's the command we've been given, is to love each other. And yes, Jesus does tell us to love our enemies in Matthew chapter 5. He does tell us in Matthew chapter 22 to love your neighbors. We talk about that a lot here. But in this specific instance, Jesus' new command is for us as followers of Jesus to love one another with an agape love. To love other followers of Jesus with an agape love. That's the new command that he's giving us. So practically speaking, what does this look like, and who is one another? Well, we are followers of Jesus. Therefore, it's important for us to understand that this applies to those within your church body. Those within your church body. We are here together on Sunday mornings. We gather together, and the command that Jesus has given us is to love one another with a sacrificial, unconditional love. I don't necessarily think that what he was intending by that was to walk into a room and sit quietly by ourselves and then, walk out after a cup of coffee. I think that there's a lot more to agape love than just attending a service on a Sunday morning. So how are we loving one another sacrificially and unconditionally when we gather here together on Sundays? I'm going to ask you a few questions throughout the remainder of this morning, and I think it would be helpful for you to write them down because we should have answers to these. And we shouldn't have to just scratch our head and be like, yeah, that's a good question. We should try to work at unpacking these. So one of the questions that I have for you this morning is, how are you loving agape love? Agape love. How are you loving sacrificially the other believers within this church body? How are you loving the other believers within this church body? We say it all the time. We extrapolate the commandment to love neighbors. To love our neighbors where we live, work, study, play, and worship. That's the command that Jesus has given us. Love one another as I have loved you. And it's not just this like platitude of love one another. He goes on to say, as I have loved you. He had just gotten done washing their feet. And he was getting ready to embark on the betrayal and the arrest and the crucifixion. And he's giving this command. It's a perfect picture of him serving his people. So how are we loving one another here? I love that our church community is large. I love that. I love that there are so many different people represented here. And we'll get into some of the benefits of that later. But I love that it's large. However, I think that it does create some unintended consequences for us. And I think one of those unintended consequences is that it's very, very easy to show up on Sundays. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, I promise. I struggle with this too. It's very easy to show up on Sunday mornings with this mentality of what am I going to get out of this? Right? We come here, we sit, we listen to the teaching, we listen to God's word, we listen to the worship, and we engage in those ways. And as we drive up, oftentimes what we're thinking is, God, what do you have for me this morning? And that's not a bad question to ask, but that shouldn't be the only thing that we're after on Sunday mornings. If we're taking Jesus' command seriously, then when we gather together as believers, we shouldn't just be contemplating what are we going to get, but we should be coming with something to give. And I know that that's challenging, but it completely changes the approach and what the church looks like. There was a study done in June of 2022 by Gallup, and they said that on average, 35% of churchgoers have volunteered within the last year. And that's actually a little bit higher than I would have thought. And yet it's so far short of 100%. Right? What about the other 65%? What does it look like for us to gather together? What if our mentality when we showed up here was what Jesus did when they showed up? He washed their feet. He served them. He loved them with this sacrificial love. What if that was our mentality when we showed up here on Sunday mornings? And for many of us, and I'm not just patting people on the back or giving some people a thumbs down and some people a thumbs up. That's not my intent at all. But I recognize that it takes a village to do what we do here. And there are so many people that do love sacrificially so that we can do what we do. We have our tech team. There's sound and video and lights and projection. We have a first impressions team where there's welcomers and greeters who are handing out programs, and there's ushers, and there's refreshments people who are getting here early to brew coffee so that we can be awake during the teaching, and so that there's donuts for us to eat afterwards. And there's so many other people involved, kids ministry volunteers that are teaching our kids the gospel every single week, every single service. I am so grateful for that. There's our prayer team who's here on Sunday mornings because they love you and want to pray with you and want to pray for you. Our cleaning teams get here on Saturday mornings to clean the entire campus so that we can come here and worship in an amazing facility. There's so many people that are serving, and I'm so grateful for that. But how are you agape loving this church body? If you're not serving and you would like to serve, we've made it incredibly easy. You go to serve.calvarynexus.org. Don't do it right now, but it's easy, okay? So you can definitely do it, write it down, and you can do it afterwards. But what if that's 35% was 100%? And when we gathered together, we were serving one another. So Who is one another? Those within the church body. But we also understand, according to what we do, those within your neighborhood group. Jesus models this for us very well. He goes out and he teaches the crowds, but then he also spends time with the 12, and even further, he spends time with the 3. He recognizes that there's a need for that small, tight-knit community to be able to grow in our love for God and grow in our love for neighbors. So it's so important. If you're not engaged in a small group, this is another question that I have for you to contemplate. 1, if you're not engaged, why not? If you're not participating in a neighborhood group, why not? It's so beneficial for our spiritual development and for us to grow in our love for God. But the next question that I have is, how are you loving the members of your group? With that agape, sacrificial, unconditional love, how are you loving the members of your group? When you gather together, are we gathering together again with that mindset of, I hope this group is good tonight and I get something out of this? Or are we gathering together with, I am coming to this place tonight because I want to sacrificially love the other people in my group? What's the mentality? It changes the entire environment of your group. If everyone showed up and said, how can I love you better? Rather than just, what am I going to get out of this? And again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel any sort of guilt, but I'm just saying this is the new command that Jesus has given us. To love one another in this church body, but also in our neighborhood groups. How can we do it better? How are you loving with that agape love those in your neighborhood group? And I want to address a couple benefits of this. Benefits for this community. If we can take this new commandment seriously, obviously it's going to benefit us. If we love one another unconditionally and sacrificially, obviously it's going to benefit us. So what are some of the benefits of this community? I want to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12. We see that Paul extrapolates this truth about the body of Christ. And he equates it to the human body and how each member is gifted individually and intentionally with a different gift to be utilized together so that the body can function and do what it's supposed to do. And by God's grace, we've all been given different gifts. He says in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 4 through 7, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are differences of ministries, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of activities, but it is the same God who works in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. You have been uniquely gifted by the Holy Spirit to build up this body of believers. So that next question that I want you to wrestle with is, how have you been gifted? And how are you using your gifts to love those within this community? How have you been gifted, and how are you using your gifts? Because if each and every single one of us has been gifted in a unique way, and we're all using our gifts to build up the body, then the body is functioning. And the body is working, and the body is healthy, and we're all contributing to what God has called us to do. And we take that 35% number and we make it an 100% number, and we're all using our gifts to love one another as Christ has loved us, the new commandment. The entire environment here will change, and the community around us will recognize that there is something different going on at Calvary Nexus. There's a group of people who love one another with a love that doesn't make sense. They sacrifice for one another. And they use their gifts to build one another up. So we see this variety of gifts as a benefit. But the other huge benefit, huge, massive benefit that Paul points out in 1 Corinthians 12 is shared burdens and victories. Shared burdens and victories. He says this in verses 25 through 26, there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. In an agape, loving community of believers, when one part of the body suffers, the rest of the body surrounds them to support them, to take the weight off of them, to help bear their burdens. And when one member is rejoicing because of what God has done in their life, the rest of the body comes around and rejoices, right? If we're talking about the human ankle, when you roll the human body, when you roll your ankle or twist your ankle, you don't cut it off right away and say, good luck, right? No, you hobble along trying not to move your ankle until it gets to the point where it can heal, and then it can function as a healthy contributing member of the body again. But we need all of the members of the body to be contributing. Thankfully, we have a variety of gifts. We don't want a body full of pinkies, which we don't have. We have a variety of gifts, but the point is for us to be healthy so that we can share the burdens with one another. And we acknowledge that there are going to be times and seasons in life where every single different member of the body is going to be going through a burden. And there are going to be times where every single member of the body is going to be rejoicing. And the goal for the rest of the body is to come around and to celebrate when we're celebrating and to share the weight and the burden when those members are hurting. On Thursday night, I was working in my backyard, and I threw out my back, which, if you've never thrown out your back, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine down upon you. If you have thrown out your back, you wouldn't wish it on anyone. It is a terrible thing, and you feel like you're walking around unable to move, which is not a great combination with a 4-year-old and a toddler. My girls love to be held, and I am so thankful for that. But this weekend, I was not very thankful for that, because when they come up and put their arms up, and I'm like, okay? I couldn't bend over to pick them up. And on Friday night, I'm going to put my youngest down, and she sleeps in a crib, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to set you down in this crib without completely dropping to the ground in pain. And so I walk up and I get as close as I can and I stick my arms out and I start squatting and I'm trying to lay her down. This was the most awkward thing. Usually you just kiss them and lay them down gently. And I was not able to do that. But the reality of the situation was that I was able to get her into the crib because the rest of the members of my body were functioning and they were making up for the part that was hurting. And as ridiculous as that illustration is, that's exactly the intended purpose of us being brought into this body and being gifted by God in unique ways so that when we come together, when someone is hurting, we're there with them sharing the burden. I am so thankful for the love and the grace and support of so many people in this church. When my family has gone through difficult times, there have been people bringing meals, there have been people praying for us, there have been people there for us. And likewise, we try to do the same thing for you. When you're hurting, when you're going through surgery, or when you aren't able to cook, we would love to bring a meal for you because we want to actually live out this new commandment, to support those who are hurting, to help bear the load during that season so they can get back on their feet. And by God's grace, we see the same thing in our neighborhood group. Our group comes around and supports one another. There's a family in our group going through a very difficult challenge right now, and we gathered together this past week as a group to pray for them. And while we were praying for them, at the end, one of our group members came and said, I just want to let you know I don't want to take any of the attention off or the prayers away from this other family, but I've been a mess the last 24 hours because I just found out that my mom has heart failure. And she then started crying. And I recognize I'm not ignorant of the fact that there are so many of us going through so many incredibly difficult and challenging circumstances. And while we're there praying through a family who's going through a difficult circumstance. We find out that another member in our neighborhood group is going through an incredibly difficult circumstance as well. And now it's our job to take this new commandment seriously. To actually consider what agape love looks like in this season for us is to lay down our desires, to lay down our wants, and to sacrifice our time, our talents, our treasures for those in our community. Because that's what Jesus has called us to do. But the beauty is that it doesn't just impact those within the community. It also has an impact outside of the community. And that's what Jesus addresses in verse 35 when he says this: "By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." By this, all will know who are my disciples, if you have love, agape, unconditional, sacrificial love for one another. So who is all? It's simple. Everyone outside of the community of faith. Everyone outside who is looking in at the followers of Jesus and how they love one another. We are to be an example to the world of what agape love looks like, which is just amazing if you pause and think about that. The God that we serve is characterized by love. He is the one who created the love that we are supposed to show to one another. He is the one who demonstrated the love to us in the greatest capacity we've ever seen and can ever see. And now we get to love others with that love. And the world sees us loving one another with that love. It doesn't just look attractive. Oh, wow, they sacrifice for one another. By the nature of God's character being love, it's actually a testimony. It is actually evangelism, because they are seeing the manifestation of the love of God within our community. They are better understanding that there is a God that exists, that this love is the only thing that could come from Him. Because they are loving one another so unconditionally and sacrificially and going out of their way to support and build up and bear burdens and rejoice with one another. It's a testimony to the community around us, and it points them directly to the God that we serve just by our love for one another. And all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Don't you think that if that 35% statistic shifted to 100% and we were all serving one another and we all showed up every single Sunday morning with this mentality of, I am going to sacrifice my wants, my rights, my desires, my time, my talent, my treasure for someone else because I want to show them the love of God. I want to take this command seriously. If we all showed up every Sunday morning with that mentality, can you imagine what our community, greater community, would think was going on here? Like, holy smokes. Their eyes would be like, what's happening at that church? And I want in on that. Like, when they're going through a hard time, there's a whole group of people around them that are gathering to pray for them, to support them, to bring them meals. What is that? What's going on there? They gather together to study God's word every week, and they support each other. They're there for each other. They rejoice with each other. They throw each other parties when they're sick. They bring each other meals. What's going on? How do I get that? And it points them directly to Jesus. Our community would be transformed if we took this command seriously. And so who is all? It's everyone. But also it says all will know. What is to know? To know is simple. To perceive, to notice, to realize, to understand, and to deeply relate. We are pointing all to Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, by our love for one another. So how do we do that? We wash one another's feet. We love sacrificially. Sacrificially. Jesus does that right after this Last Supper. He goes out to the garden and he goes before the Father and he says, Lord, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. Jesus did not want to endure the cross, but he did because he was being obedient to the Father. He was laying down what he wanted in that moment. To love his Father and by extension to love all of us. He endured the cross. Sacrificial love. All will know. All will know that you are my followers if you have love for one another. So inevitably, if we're demonstrating this, we're going to see benefits. There's going to be growth in our community. If we're demonstrating this, there's no way people are like, I don't want any part of that. Keep me in my solitary confinement, right? Like, there's no way. So what are the benefits of a growing community? The first is added contributing participants. There's added people who are going to be empowered by the Holy Spirit to bring their gifts before us to bless us. There are more and more people. The body is growing. The body is becoming stronger. The body is able to do more and more in this community and in this world because there are more people that are empowered by the Spirit coming to faith and coming to be part of this community. The other benefit that we see is added support and rejoicing. There are more people who are able to come and to bear the burden. There are more people who will come, who will celebrate what God is doing in our lives. And there is a tremendous benefit to this community growing. Our desire is for all to know that we are his followers based by our love for one another. So you were created intentionally by God to be part of a community. And yes, we greatly benefit from being part of a loving community. But we also benefit so greatly from contributing to that community. And one of the things that I love is that we focus on here is loving God and loving our neighbors. And when we gather together and when we actually start to love others, do you know what that does? It creates this perpetual cycle that's so amazing. As we start to love others with that agape love, it creates a love in us for God more. And so as we start to love others, we start to see that our love for God increases. And as our love for God is increasing, you know what we see? That our love for our neighbors and others within this community starts to increase. And all of these things just start perpetuating, and we're loving God more, and we're loving our neighbors more, and we're growing as followers of Jesus. We're making disciples, and we're seeing all of this come together because that's how God designed it. As we grow in our love for others, and as we grow in our love for God, both of those things are elevated. And we grow as followers of Jesus in our love for God simply by loving the person sitting next to you. What a beautiful system that he's given us. So by this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I just want to invite you, if you are not part of the community of faith, if you are not a follower of Jesus, and you recognize that walking through life alone is challenging and you're ready to walk with him and to walk with the rest of us, I just want to invite you in the quiet of your heart to go before the Lord, acknowledge that you've fallen short of his glory, acknowledge that he went to the cross to show the most magnificent picture of agape love that he possibly could for you, so that you could be forgiven and reconciled. In the quiet of your heart, go before God And let him know that you want to follow him. Let him know that you want to be part of this community of faith, the body of Christ. Let's pray together. Father God, we thank you for your design. We thank you for your new command that we should love one another. Agape love, sacrificial love, unconditional love. And God, I pray that while that is one of the most difficult things to do, that we constantly find ourselves failing to understand and falling short, God, I pray that we would take this command seriously, that we would begin to lay down our wants, our desires, our time, our talent, our treasures at your feet so that you can use them in a way where we're able to love you and love those around us better. God, you gave up everything for us. And we want to love others with that same love, so that the world may know how good you are. So Father, use us. Use us to love one another. Grow this community, not out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. God, grow this community out of love for you and love for one another. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.